The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 1, The Fall. Chapter 4. It was the achievement of music. Tal stared down at the registry, unable to believe that his name was there. But it was, complete with his family sigil etched in light. He couldn't possibly have made this mistake. But obviously he had. The achievement of music! After combat and healing, that was probably the worst. Tal didn't even have a composition to use. He couldn't withdraw either. That wasn't allowed, unless he was sick or injured. For a moment, Tal thought of throwing himself down one of the steeper stairways. A broken arm or leg would let him off. For now. But then he would have no chance in any of the achievements. Tal glanced at his sunstone, looking at the bands of color to work out the time. He had less than 20 minutes before he would have to perform an original composition of light and music. It was impossible. Like all the Chosen, Tal was a trained musician, but he had never displayed any great talent, and he certainly didn't have time to write an entirely new piece of music. His only chance would be to use an old one. It would have to be something that had never been performed before, or so old that nobody recognized it. Old, Tal said to himself, and an idea suddenly came into his head. His shadow guard caught his thought, and changed from a very ugly sort of lungfish into a thin, stooped man much taller than Tal, with a very pronounced nose. It was a caricature, one that Tal recognized. His great-uncle Ebbet! Ebbet would help! Tal was off again, racing through the corridors. He had to forget about being careful, and took every shortcut he knew. 2 minutes later, Tal was throwing himself feet first into the laundry chute. A huge bag of clothes hurtled just ahead of him, then Tal was sliding down himself, counting the levels. Orange, 3, 2, 1. Red, 6, 5, 4, 3, he said aloud, the sound of his own voice making him feel better. At red 2, he stuck his feet into the sides of the chute and felt the sudden heat through the soles of his shoes as friction slowed him down. Ebbet lived in red 1, the very lowest level of the Chosen. Below that lay the work caverns of the Underfolk. Tal had never been there. He knew there were few sunstones in the Underfolk caverns, just enough to create a dim twilight so the servants could work. It was said to be perpetually steamy as well, from the hot pools that supplied the castle's warmth. Below the pools, tunnels of lava flowed. The lava collection pools were the creation of the castle's builders, the Chosen of long ago, who wielded many powers the current generations had long lost. Tal felt a chill go through him as he climbed out of the chute. Soon he might be forced to join the Underfolk, and might never return to the bright levels of the Chosen. Even today, if he completely failed in the achievement of music and was given more deluminance... He checked his sunstone again. He only had 15 minutes left until the achievement. If Ebbet wasn't home, Tal didn't know what he would do. He set off at a run, hoping that he didn't meet any red half-brights or dimmers, who would be delighted to politely delay an orange boy. They wouldn't do any serious harm, but they would waste his precious time. Ebbet had once been a Shadow Lord himself, a bright blinder of the Indigo Order, the second highest in the castle. Ebbet had been the shining hope of the family, and had seemed certain of climbing Violet. But something had gone terribly wrong for him when Tal was a baby. He had been forced all the way down to red, and the lowest level. He was a dimmer now, a single step above the Underfolk. Somehow he managed to stay there, despite his strange ways and outspoken tongue. He chose to live in twilight, at the end of a rough tunnel without a door. His weird collection of constantly rearranged furniture occupied a good 100 yards of corridor, and Ebbet himself could be found anywhere around it. Tal had no idea how he stopped people coming in or stealing his things, but he had never seen anyone there except family or invited guests. Today, a large wardrobe of white stone marked the beginning of Ebbet's realm. It completely blocked the corridor, and Tal was momentarily stumped by it. Then he opened the door and saw that the wardrobe had no back. He went through, shutting the door behind him. After carefully making his way around several chairs and desks, a huge bird cage, and a bronze orrery, Tal found Ebbet sleeping on an old gilded throne. It had obviously once been studded with sunstones, because it was covered in holes and scratch marks from where they had been removed. Ebbet himself was wearing a plain grey robe without any of the proper markings of his order or position. He wore a single small sunstone in a silver ring on his index finger. It flashed as Tal approached, and Ebbet's spirit shadow stepped out of the darkness behind the throne. It was a huge cat, with a great mane around its head and a ridge along its back, completely black even in the dim light, the mark of a powerful spirit shadow. It yawned as Tal approached, showing lighter shadows inside its enormous mouth. Tal's shadow guard turned itself into a smaller version of the main cat, in tribute. Tal took a few steps forward, but not too many. He'd always been a bit afraid of Ebbet's spirit shadow, even though he knew it wouldn't hurt him. "Great uncle," he said. As Ebbet still didn't move, he said it again, a bit louder. "Great uncle." Ebbet still didn't move. Tal took another step forward and almost shouted, "Uncle Ebbet!" The old man on the throne reacted to that. He jumped up and shouted, "Kill!" The huge cat spirit shadow leaped forward. Tal jumped back and fell over a small three-legged stool, hurtling toward the hard stone floor.